Hi everyone, my name's Alicia. I want to introduce to you my book Reading the Qur'an. Is Islam necessarily against women's rights? Is Islam at odds with liberal ideals? These were the questions I had in mind when I started to write Reading the Qur'an. I studied philosophy, did a PhD in Anglo-American philosophy, but became fascinated with the Islamic world. I went to Egypt frequently. I love Arabic music and literature while I hate the sexual harassment and religious conservatism there. I wanted to know what the Qur'an actually says. Are people practicing Islam according to its holy book or simply picking what they like? Liberals these days tend to argue that people should be free to practice their religion, for example, to wear the hijab. However, as recent demonstrations in Iran show us, such well-intended gestures sometimes may perpetuate patriarchal oppression rather than helping female Muslims. In my book, I put forward my position regarding these issues and lay out my reasoning. I argue against literal interpretations of the Qur'an and put forward a methodology for the interpretation of this key religious text. The gist of my argument is that many of the Muslims who follow doctrines derived from the Qur'an and the Hadiths have not given enough consideration to the issues involved in interpreting these texts. I give textual evidence that Quranic passages were not intended to be perfect guidance suitable for all places and all times, and argue for the importance of independent thinking in following Islam. In the introduction, I explain the motivations for writing the book. Then in chapter 2, I argue that Islam needs reformation, that we urgently need to fight against regressive trends. In chapter 3, I set out the principles for a different reading of the Qur'an. I put forward a methodology for interpreting the Qur'an consisting of 5 principles, namely uncertainty, non-literality, contextuality, individuality, and rationality. I argue that there are many uncertainties surrounding the exact meaning of many passages in the Qur'an and the Hadiths, which are records of Prophet Muhammad's words and actions. So for the avoidance of error, people should be given maximum freedom. We should leave it to Allah to judge them at the last judgment. I contend that religious texts are often allegorical because the subjects discussed are frequently beyond the experience of their readers. We cannot take such passages literally in contemporary life. We need to pay attention to the historical context of Islamic texts. We should critically and independently review religious texts, not accepting the views of religious scholars or officials blindly. We should reach a reasonable interpretation of Islam by means of modification and extrapolation to decide which are key tenets and which are age-specific and non-essential. In chapter 4, I review passages in the Qur'an that have to do with the main tenets of Islam and reach liberal interpretations according to the principles given in chapter 3. I argue that the main criterion for being a Muslim should be moral action rather than a confession of faith. In chapter 5, I review passages in the Qur'an that have to do with women, giving interpretations and unearthing passages compatible with feminism and gender equality. I contextualize the Quranic passages about women and argue that we should act in the spirit of improving women's status rather than follow exact but obsolete practices found in the Qur'an. These arguments culminate in a discussion of liberal reform in chapter 6. Here, I argue that we should leave judgment to Allah and take for the guidance of our lives those passages in the Qur'an that are the most spiritually exalted. In the last chapter, chapter 7, I talk about the concept of philosophical religion. If we follow the position of my book, then there would be a rebirth of religion including Islam. I would like to thank Dr. Gillian Bigley for editing the text with meticulous care and helping me adapt the text for non-specialist readers. If you have ever wondered about what to think about Islam, then my book is for you. Thank you.